The city of Los Angeles always seemed to breathe in neon and exhale smoke. Its streets glistened with the false promise of dreams, every billboard a sermon about fame, every studio gate a door to heaven or hell. For Ethan Cole, those gates had long since opened. At 38, he had the money, the mansion in the hills, and the reputation of a man who could make or break careers with a single phone call. What the world saw was a charming, self-made producer whose smile could melt tension in any room. What few recognized was the hunger behind it, a hunger not for art but for control. Lena Hart saw only the smile. She was 25, barely 2 years in Hollywood, still juggling late-night auditions with early morning shifts at a Sunset Boulevard cafe. When Ethan walked in one evening, trailed by executives and assistants, Lena's world shifted. He ordered coffee like it mattered, spoke to her like she wasn't invisible, and left a business card on the counter with a wink that felt like destiny. That night. She stared at the card under her dim apartment lamp, whispering his name as though it were already part of her future. When Ethan invited her to dinner, Lena said yes before the question was finished. The restaurant was all glass and gold, the kind of place she'd only seen from the outside. He leaned across the table, voice low and deliberate. "You've got something most actresses don't, Lena," he said. "Not just beauty, fire. The kind that doesn't fade when the lights go out." Her cheeks burned. "You really think so?" "I know so." His eyes lingered on her, not like a man seeing a woman, but like a collector eyeing a prize. Their romance unfolded with dizzying speed. Ethan sent cars to pick her up for dates, draped her in designer gowns for premieres, whispered promises about roles he could secure. Paparazzi photos showed them laughing in doorways, her hand looped through his arm. To the outside world, it was the classic Hollywood fairy tale, the powerful producer and the starlet on the rise. But even fairy tales have shadows. At his parties, she noticed the way people deferred to him, not out of respect, but out of fear. Jokes stopped mid-sentence when Ethan entered a room. Lena told herself it was the weight of his success, the gravity of his name. Yet something in his touch, firm, lingering, possessive, hinted at a darker truth. Still, Lena wanted to believe. She wanted a safe harbor in a city that chewed people up. In Ethan's orbit, she felt chosen, protected, seen. What she couldn't see was how quickly admiration could become a cage. One night, as they drove up the winding hills to his home, she glanced at him, silhouetted against the dash lights. His jaw was tense, his gaze fixed. "You ever think about what it costs?" he asked suddenly. "What does? This business, fame, love, trust, none of it comes free." He turned to her, smiling faintly. "The trick is making sure you're the one collecting, not paying." The words unsettled her, but she laughed it off, chalking it up to Hollywood cynicism. She leaned her head on his shoulder, ignoring the faint chill his tone left behind. From the outside, they were perfect. The photographs, the red carpets, the champagne toasts, all spoke of romance in its golden age. Yet inside Ethan's carefully curated world, another story was beginning to write itself, one not of love, but of possession. And as Lena unlocked the door to his apartment for the first time, setting her suitcase down in the corner with a nervous smile, the shadows waiting behind those walls stirred awake. The first night in Ethan's apartment felt like stepping into a dream she didn't quite believe belonged to her. Marble floors stretched beneath her feet, chandeliers glimmered overhead, and the Los Angeles skyline bled into the glass walls like a painting made just for him. Lena set her small suitcase down, embarrassed by how modest it looked against the vastness of the room. Ethan slid his arm around her waist, his voice low and steady. "From now on," he said, "this is your home too." The words filled her with warmth, but also a strange pressure, as though the walls themselves were listening, measuring her gratitude. She smiled anyway, pressing a kiss to his cheek, desperate not to let doubt shadow what should be the happiest, moment of her life. The days that followed were wrapped in glamour. Ethan took her to premieres, dinners with studio executives, charity galas where champagne poured endlessly, and photographers followed their every step. To the cameras, they were inseparable, the producer and his rising star draped in silk and success. Lena told herself she had finally made it, that after years of rejection and small roles, she was safe in his orbit. But safety had a cost. Ethan began making small suggestions at first, gentle nudges disguised as care. That dress is a little too short for tonight. Wear the black one instead. Or, you don't need to audition for that indie project. You're above that now. Each time, Lena hesitated, then obeyed. He spoke with such certainty, such confidence, that it was easy to believe he knew best. At home, the atmosphere shifted. His apartment was no longer a palace. It was a stage where Ethan directed every detail. He decided when they ate, who they invited over, how she should wear her hair before they went out. Once, when she texted a friend without telling him, his smile thinned. "Just remember," he murmured, brushing a hand along her jawline. "Not everyone wants the best for you, but I do." His tone was affectionate, but his eyes didn't match. Lena tried to dismiss the unease. She told herself this was passion, the intensity of a man deeply in love. After all, wasn't this what people meant when they said relationships took compromise? Yet she felt her world shrinking. Each boundary she surrendered tightening around her like invisible thread. The apartment itself began to feel different. She noticed locked doors, a private office, a storage room he never let her enter. Whenever, she asked, Ethan waved it away. "Business," he said, kissing her hand. "You wouldn't be interested." One night, as she moved quietly through the darkened hallway, Lena caught sight of his reflection in the glass wall. He wasn't watching the skyline, he was watching her, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he smiled, but something about it made her heart stutter. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. She forced a laugh. "Just needed water." He kissed her forehead before guiding her back to bed, his arm heavy around her shoulders. She lay awake long after his breathing steadied, her gaze tracing the ceiling. The city lights, outside, blinked like warnings, but Lena convinced herself she was imagining things, that this was what love looked like when it was real, when it demanded sacrifice. Still, in the quiet hours of the night, a question pressed against her mind, refusing to be silenced. Was this devotion, or control dressed as devotion? And deep down, in the silence she wouldn't yet admit, she already knew the answer. The apartment seemed alive in ways Lena could not yet name. Every shadow, every reflection, every faint click of a lock in the distance was a note in a symphony she wasn't meant to hear. Ethan moved through the space with ease, his presence commanding, as if the walls themselves bent to his will. She admired him for it at first, marveling at how effortlessly he navigated the city that chewed most people alive. But admiration is a fragile thing, easily fractured by truths hidden in plain sight. It started with small anomalies. Her makeup bag would be moved, items slightly out of place. A drawer she was certain she had closed left ajar. At first, she blamed herself, thinking she had imagined it, or perhaps Ethan had tidied while she slept. But then she noticed the cameras. Not the obvious security cameras in the lobby or near the entrance, but tiny, almost invisible lenses tucked into bookshelves, smoke detectors, even behind framed photographs. He called it artful design, a way to ensure the apartment was secure. Lena smiled, nodded, and said nothing. Yet each lens felt like a silent eye, measuring her, recording her, cataloguing her existence. Ethan spoke casually about privacy in conversation, warning about people who could take advantage of her, who could twist a moment into a story. His charm was a shield, but the words cut like knives in the dark. "The world," he said one evening, leaning back in his leather chair, "is hungry. You have to feed it on your terms or it will devour you." Lena laughed, but the laugh rang hollow. She imagined what he meant. Perhaps it was all just metaphor, a lesson in caution. But the more she noticed, the more the lens of the camera pressed on her life, watching, recording, judging. At first, she tried to rationalize it. Perhaps he filmed only for security, a harmless archive of their lives. But curiosity became need. And one night, when he was called away on a business emergency, she slipped into his office. The room was dark, except for the glow of a single computer screen. A folder blinked at her name. Lena's hands shook as she moved closer, the quiet hum of the machines filling her ears. She didn't want to see, and yet she could not resist. Clicking the folder, the screen filled with clips of her. Unguarded moments, intimate and raw. Every corner of her life captured without consent. She recoiled, staggering backward. The air thickened, pressing down on her chest as betrayal and rage coiled inside her. Ethan's love, his protection, had been a lie. Every gentle touch, every whispered word of encouragement had been a thread in a web of surveillance. Her mind raced, spiraling through possibilities, rehearsing confrontations she might never have the courage to voice. Who else had seen these? How long had he been recording her? The apartment, once a haven, now felt like a cage lined with invisible eyes. When Ethan returned, his presence filled the room like sunlight after a storm. He noticed her pallor but said nothing at first, smiling faintly as he poured 2 glasses of wine. "Rough day?" he asked. Lena didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. And as she stared at him, at the casual innocence of his gestures, a shiver ran down her spine. She realized then that the life she had stepped into was no longer about love. It was about control, and she was already ensnared. The first. Cracks appeared not with a confrontation, but with whispers she overheard when she wasn't meant to. Lena had been making coffee early one morning, the apartment still half asleep around her, when a voice drifted from the study, low, urgent, and unmistakably Ethan's. She froze, pressing her back against the wall, listening. "Yes, everything is in place. I have all of it," he said. The voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that masked obsession. "No one will suspect a thing. She trusts me completely." Lena's heart hammered. She imagined him speaking to a colleague, maybe a studio executive, and she forced herself to believe it was about a project, about work. But the words twisted in her mind, and she felt the first flicker of fear. She tried to push it away, pouring coffee and rehearsing explanations in her head. Maybe she had misheard. Maybe it wasn't about her. Yet over the next few days, subtle signs began to add up. The way he answered his phone, abruptly ending calls when she entered the room. The way he cleared his desk before she could approach. The small locks and passwords on devices he previously allowed her to use. One night, she confronted him gently, the words trembling in her mouth. "Ethan, I overheard something. You said, you have everything?" He looked at her, amusement flickering in his eyes, and laughed softly. "Everything? Oh, Lena, you worry too much. I was talking about the contracts, the studio approvals. Nothing to stress over." She nodded, swallowing her unease, but the pit in her stomach refused to dissipate. Something about the way he said it, the precision of his smile, the slight pause before his laugh, hinted at deceit. Evenings became a battle between instinct and desire to believe. Lena tried to immerse herself in her work, rehearsals and scripts, yet her thoughts returned again and again to that phrase, to the hidden everything that he claimed. She found herself glancing at doors, corners, even mirrors, searching for what she feared but couldn't yet name. In her solitude, paranoia crept in. Every message, every email, every click of a keyboard felt laden with secrets. The apartment, once a sanctuary, became a maze of possibilities where every shadow was suspect. And yet, Ethan remained impeccably charming. He planned dates, gifted her flowers, whispered assurances that all was well. You don't need to worry about anything, he murmured one evening, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I take care of everything for you. But Lena's trust had shifted, the foundation she had built crumbling silently. She sensed now that her life was no longer entirely her own, that the love she thought she had found might conceal something far more sinister. The first seeds of doubt had been planted, and from that doubt grew questions she wasn't ready to answer, questions that would demand truths she might wish she had never uncovered. Lena had tried to dismiss the suspicions gnawing at her mind, telling herself she was imagining things. But one quiet evening, when Ethan had left for a late meeting, the apartment felt different, heavier, as if it were holding its breath. Curiosity, fear, and a desperate need for answers pushed her toward his office, the one room he always kept locked. She fumbled with the doorknob, heart hammering, until it gave way, revealing the dim glow of his computer screens. The folders blinked at her like silent alarms. One in particular caught her eye, labeled with her name. Her hand trembled as she clicked it open, half expecting it to be nothing more than scripts or contracts. But the screen filled with images and clips of her, private, intimate, moments she had never shared with anyone. Every angle of her life, every corner of her apartment, every tender, unguarded expression had been captured without her knowledge. She stumbled back, gagging on disbelief. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the man she thought she knew with, the one whose actions now stared back at her in cold, digital clarity. The apartment, once a haven, now felt like a prison lined with cameras, each lens a silent witness to every private moment. Her fingers shook as she scrolled through the files, evidence of betrayal so complete that it stole her breath, the warmth she had felt in his embrace, the charm in his smile, the words of reassurance whispered late at night. All tainted now, instruments of control rather than affection. Rage coiled inside her like a living thing, hot and urgent, mixing with the disbelief that had taken root. For a long time, she simply sat on the edge of his leather chair, staring at the screen, unable to form words or even cry. Each click revealed more, each image a deeper cut. How long had this been happening? Who else might have seen these files? Her life, her career, her very sense of self felt violated in ways she couldn't yet name. When Ethan returned, the sound of his keys in the lock made her heart stop. She closed the laptop, shoved the folders out of sight, and tried to compose herself. He entered, calm and unsuspecting, as if nothing had changed. "You look tired," he said, brushing a hand across her cheek. "Long day at rehearsal?" Lena nodded, forcing a smile that tasted bitter. "Yeah, just rehearsals." His eyes lingered on her, a mix of concern and pride, completely unaware of what she had seen. She wanted to scream, to confront him, to tear through the layers of lies he had built so meticulously. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she retreated to her room, shutting the door behind her. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass of the window, staring out at the city below, feeling the vast, indifferent lights mock her betrayal. The apartment, that once promised love, now whispered threats, and the man she had trusted most in the world had proven himself capable of the deepest violation. Lena's mind swirled with possibilities, plans forming and dissolving in equal measure. The knowledge she now carried was a weapon, but also a curse. She knew, with a sinking certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. And when she finally slept that night, it was fitful, haunted by the images burned into her memory, by the man she thought she loved, and by the shadow of the choices she would soon have to make. Lena waited until the evening, heart pounding in her chest, rehearsing the words she might never fully say aloud. Ethan returned later than usual. The weight of the city clinging to him like cologne, he entered the apartment with a smile, casual, unaware of the storm brewing behind her eyes. "Long night?" he asked, removing his coat and tossing it onto the chair. "You could say that," Lena replied, her voice steady but cold, each word measured. "We need to talk." Ethan's smile faltered slightly, curiosity flickering across his features. About what? She stepped forward, hands trembling, fighting the surge of anger and fear. About your cameras, the files, everything. For a moment, silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. Ethan's expression softened, almost mockingly, as if her words were a minor inconvenience. Lena, it's not what you think. I was only protecting you, making sure nothing could hurt you. Her laugh was bitter, a harsh echo of disbelief. Protecting me? By filming me without my knowledge? By turning my life into some private archive? He took a step closer, voice low, persuasive. It's not about control. It's about love. You trust me, don't you? I only want to preserve every moment of us, every detail, every gesture, because I care. Lena shook her head, fury and betrayal warring inside her. Caring doesn't mean violating me, Ethan. You've crossed every line and you think, this is love. This is obsession. He reached out, his hand brushing hers, a touch that once felt tender, but now carried the weight of manipulation. You're overreacting. I've done nothing but show you how much you mean to me. You'll thank me one day, once you see it my way. The words slithered through her, a poisonous reassurance, but Lena could feel her control slipping. The apartment, the city, even his gaze, all of it seemed to close in, a cage built from charm and fear. She realized then that the man she had fallen for wasn't merely flawed, he was dangerous in a way that demanded compliance. Her chest tightened, tears welling despite her rage. Dangerous? You call this protection? You call this love? Ethan's eyes darkened slightly, a subtle warning beneath the veneer of calm. Lena, you need to understand. I've given you everything. Everything you have, everything you are. It's because of me. Don't let panic ruin what we've built. Panic and fury surged together, a volatile mix that left her trembling. She wanted to scream, to flee, to shatter the illusion entirely, but the threat in his tone anchored her. For the first time, she understood that confrontation alone wouldn't undo the power he had over her life. Words would not suffice. She backed away, retreating toward the door of her bedroom, mind racing with plans she didn't yet dare voice. Ethan followed, ever calm, ever persuasive, masking control with affection, coercion with charm. The apartment seemed to hum around them, alive with tension, filled with invisible witnesses to their unraveling. That night, Lena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the city outside and the silent pulse of betrayal in her chest. She understood now that the truth was a double-edged sword. She had uncovered his secret, but the confrontation had revealed something darker, Ethan's capacity to manipulate, to bend reality to his will, and to mask obsession as devotion. And as she drifted into uneasy sleep, a plan began to form in the recesses of her mind, a fragile glimmer of reclaiming power in a world where control had been stolen from her. Lena woke to the weight of exhaustion pressing against her chest, a heaviness she could no longer ignore. Sleep had offered no solace. Her dreams were fractured, filled with shadows of Ethan's smile, the glint of cameras, and her own reflection staring back with eyes wide in fear. Each day blurred into the next, a haze of rehearsals, auditions, and whispered doubts that no one else could see. The city around her thrummed with life, oblivious to the quiet unraveling of hers. She found herself pacing the apartment, hands twisting together, rehearsing words she might never say aloud. Every corner seemed watched, every shadow a reminder of betrayal. Even the smallest sound, the click of a door, the hum of a refrigerator, felt amplified, a signal that she was never alone. She drank too much wine, hoping the heat would dull her mind, but it only sharpened the edges of fear. Ethan moved through their world as if nothing had changed. He brought flowers, planned evenings out, whispered assurances of love and devotion. To anyone else, they appeared the perfect couple. Laughter at parties, kisses in public, the illusion of happiness. But Lena saw the strings. She felt the pressure of his control, the subtle manipulations that had grown more insidious since the confrontation. Some nights she would catch herself standing before the mirror, staring at her own face, trying to recall the girl who had come to Hollywood with hope in her chest. That girl felt distant, fading, replaced by someone hyper-aware, wary, calculating. Trust was a concept she could no longer afford. Every instinct screamed that her life was no longer entirely her own. The breakdown came in quiet moments. She would sit on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, unable to summon tears or words, only a growing hollowness that spread through her limbs. Panic would surge without warning, her chest tightening, mind racing with images of cameras, files, and betrayal. Nights blurred, and with each passing day, the fear and fury became intertwined, inseparable. One evening, alone in the dim light of the kitchen, she ran her fingers over the counter, imagining how easy it would be to disappear, to vanish from the gaze of someone who had watched her every intimate moment. She thought of her friends, her career, her family, but each comforting thought was immediately shadowed by doubt. Could anyone truly protect her? Could anyone even understand what she had endured? Ethan called from the living room, his voice smooth, coaxing. "Lena, dinner's ready. You need to eat something." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The sound of his presence only reminded her that escape was not yet possible. Her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water, staring out at the city lights, wishing for clarity, wishing for courage, wishing for the power to reclaim her life. The hours passed in silence, punctuated by her own heavy breathing. Her body ached with tension. Her mind teetered on the edge of panic, and the apartment, once a symbol of luxury and safety, felt like a cage lined with invisible eyes. Each tick of the clock marked time stolen. Each shadow seemed to whisper threats. By the time she finally drifted into a fitful sleep, Lena had realized that her life had been irrevocably altered. The breakdown was not a single moment, but a process, a slow erosion of trust, safety, and certainty. And as her mind finally slipped into darkness, a seed of resolve took root amidst the fear. She would confront this violation, and she would find a way to reclaim control, no matter the cost. The apartment was silent, heavy with a tension that pressed down on Lena's chest. She moved through the rooms cautiously, each step measured, her thoughts a storm of fear and anger. The city outside pulsed with life, unaware of the turmoil inside the walls of Ethan's luxurious home. Every object felt like it might hold a secret, every shadow a hidden witness. It was in the bedroom, tucked under the nightstand, that she found it. The gun. Cold, metallic, and heavy in her hands, it felt both alien and intimate, a symbol of power she had never held before. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it, turning it over, feeling the weight of possibility pressing down on her. She imagined Ethan lying in the next room, oblivious to the storm she carried, and a pulse of fear surged through her veins. She set it back down and picked it up again, rehearsing the confrontation in her mind. Words alone had failed. Reason, pleading, and even rage had only served to highlight his control, his manipulation. The gun was different, tangible, real, an instrument of authority she could wield. The thought terrified her, even as it tempted her with a dangerous clarity. For hours, she wandered the apartment, weighing her options, her mind looping endlessly. Could she confront him now? Should she wait? Could a single shot restore the dignity he had stolen, or would it destroy her completely? Each scenario played out with vivid intensity, her heart hammering with anticipation and dread. She remembered the moments she had trusted him, the laughter, the gentle touch, the promises whispered in the dark. They were poisoned now, transformed by betrayal and surveillance into a web of manipulation. She had to act, but the weight of consequence grounded her in hesitation. Later, she found herself standing by the window, the city lights below sparkling like 1,000 eyes. Her reflection merged with the night, and she stared at the woman she had become, cautious, calculating, and yet trembling with the first seeds of resolve. The gun remained in her hand, a heavy reminder of the choice she now carried. Ethan returned, keys jingling, the sound slicing through the thick silence. He entered the apartment with his usual calm, unaware of the shift in the room, of the danger that now lurked in the very hands he had sought to control. "You're quiet tonight," he said casually, removing his coat. "Long day at the studio?" Lena looked at him, the gun hidden behind her back, her mind racing. Her voice was steady, but her pulse betrayed her. "We need to talk." He smiled faintly, stepping closer, a predator unaware of the trap closing around him. Always dramatic. "Lena, what now?" She swallowed, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Words would not suffice. The gun was there, and with it came a possibility that had been unimaginable until now, the chance to reclaim control, to assert her existence in a life where she had been nothing more than a subject under surveillance. And in that charged silence, as the city hummed below, Lena understood that everything had changed. The apartment, once a gilded cage, had become the stage for a reckoning she could no longer avoid. The apartment was thick with tension, every shadow stretching long and dark across the marble floors. Ethan entered with the casual confidence of a man who believed he controlled everything, the city, the studio, and now Lena herself. She stood in the center of the living room, the gun heavy in her hands, her chest tight with adrenaline, fury and fear. "Lena," he said, smiling faintly, "you're tense tonight. Everything okay?" Her voice trembled, but carried steel. "You know exactly why I'm tense. I know what you've been doing." Ethan's expression flickered, a shadow of surprise quickly masked by amusement. "Doing? I don't follow." "You've been filming me, watching me, collecting every private moment of my life without my consent." She spat, the words echoing through the apartment like gunshots themselves. He stepped closer, hands raised slightly, his calm confidence a taunting shield. "Lena, you're overreacting. I've done nothing but preserve memories, protect you, ensure no one else could harm you." "Protect me?" she hissed, her knuckles white around the gun. "By violating me, by turning my life into some kind of archive for your obsession." Ethan's eyes darkened, a flash of warning behind the mask of charm. "You're letting paranoia cloud your judgment. I love you. Everything I've done is for us, for our life together." The room seemed to contract around them. Air thickened, charged with years of manipulation, betrayal, and unspoken threats. Lena's pulse pounded in her ears as she backed toward the corner, the gun rising instinctively, a shield against the man who had violated every boundary. Ethan paused, noticing her hesitation, the weight of the weapon. His voice softened, coaxing. "Put that down, Lena. You don't need to do this." "I've tried words. I've tried reason. I've tried to trust you," she said, tears blurring her vision. "It's over. You made sure of that." A beat passed, frozen in time, before a sudden movement. Ethan lunged, confident that charm and persuasion would sway her. Lena's fear and rage coiled into a single, desperate act. A shot rang out, sharp and deafening, shattering the fragile illusion of their relationship and the apartment's heavy silence. Ethan stumbled, disbelief etched across his face, and then his body crumpled, blood seeping into the polished floor. Lena dropped the gun instantly, her hands shaking violently as the reality of what she had done washed over her. She pressed her palms to her mouth, choking back a scream, her mind spinning with horror and relief, anger and fear all at once. The apartment felt impossibly quiet, the hum of the city outside muted by the gravity of what had occurred within these walls. She sank to the floor beside him, shaking uncontrollably, staring at the man she had once loved, the man whose obsession had driven them both to this breaking point. Her mind raced. Call the police, flee, explain, hide. Every choice felt monumental, every path fraught with danger. She clutched the gun, now heavy with consequence, and whispered into the emptiness, "I didn't mean to." Time slowed, each second stretching unbearably, until at last she forced herself to stand. Her reflection in the glass walls showed a woman transformed, a girl swallowed by fear and fury now forged into someone who had acted, who had taken control in a life that had long denied her any. And as the city continued its indifferent pulse outside, Lena understood that nothing, not fame, not love, not betrayal, would ever be the same. The apartment was eerily still. Ethan's body lay sprawled across the marble floor, the polished surface reflecting the dark, spreading stain. Lena pressed her hands to her mouth, her chest heaving as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving a hollow, sickening ache in its place. The city outside hummed obliviously, lights twinkling as if nothing had happened, mocking the chaos inside the apartment. Her gaze flicked to the gun on the floor, now cold and inert in the silence. She couldn't breathe. Each thought collided violently in her mind. Call the police, flee, hide, explain. Every option felt simultaneously necessary and impossible. She sank to her knees beside him, her hands shaking uncontrollably, staring at the man she had once loved, whose obsession had twisted intimacy into control. Tears blurred her vision as the enormity of what she had done settled over her like a suffocating weight. She remembered the files, the hidden cameras, the betrayal that had built layer upon layer until confrontation was the only path left. And yet, the reality of ending a life, even in self-preservation, was a chasm too wide to fully cross. Finally, her trembling fingers found the phone on the counter. She dialed, whispering the words like a prayer. 911. I didn't mean to. He's... The operator's calm voice tried to anchor her, but panic bubbled beneath her skin, threatening to spill over. She staggered through the apartment, checking doors, ensuring the cameras she had once ignored couldn't record this moment, couldn't be used against her. Everything felt surreal, the chandelier glittering mockingly above, the city lights casting long, indifferent shadows, the silence broken only by her shallow breaths, and the distant hum of traffic. Neighbors would hear, sirens soon, police would arrive, questions would be asked, evidence would be collected. Lena's life, already fragile and fractured by betrayal, was now on the edge of irreversible transformation. She had acted in fear, in fury, in desperation, and the consequences would be absolute. As she waited, Lena sank to the floor again, her back against the cold wall. Her mind replayed the moments leading here. Ethan's charm, his control, the files, the confrontation, the gun. Each memory was sharp, a reminder of the life she had once believed in and the betrayal that had forced her hand. She shivered, not from the chill of the apartment, but from the knowledge that nothing could return to what it had been. The first sound of sirens was a jolt, slicing through the haze of shock. Lena took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling hands, to prepare for the inevitable flood of questions, accusations, and judgments. She knew the world would see only the result, the act, not the hidden years of manipulation, the secret surveillance, the betrayal that had driven her to this moment. And yet, amidst the terror and uncertainty, a small ember of clarity burned within her. She had acted. She had confronted the control that had haunted her. And though the path ahead was fraught with peril, she was no longer entirely powerless. The door clicked. The voices of first responders echoed down the hallway. Lena stood, hands still shaking, and faced the reality of what she had done. There would be no undoing, no return to innocence. But for the first time she felt, however fleetingly, the tentative stirrings of control over her own life. The courtroom was tense, every eye fixed on Lena as she entered, the click of her heels echoing against the polished wood floors. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and the weight of public scrutiny pressed down on her like a physical force. To the world outside, she was just another scandal. The rising actress who had shot her powerful producer boyfriend, but inside, she carried the years of manipulation, surveillance, and betrayal that had led her to this moment. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Lena as a jealous, unstable woman who acted out of rage and ambition. They described the hidden cameras, the luxurious apartment, the confrontation, all framed to suggest premeditation, to strip her of the context of abuse and control. Each word felt like a hammer striking against the fragile remnants of her composure. The defense countered carefully, weaving a narrative of violation and manipulation. They presented the files, the surveillance evidence, and detailed Ethan's obsession, control, and emotional abuse. They argued that Lena had acted out of fear, desperation, and self-preservation, that the life she had built with Ethan was a gilded cage, and she had broken free in the only way she could. Lena sat quietly through it all, her eyes often fixed, on the floor. She felt the weight of every judgment, every whisper, every glance from strangers and journalists alike. Some faces in the gallery were sympathetic, others hostile, but she could not focus on them. Her attention was on the facts, the evidence, the truth of her own experience. The testimonies were harrowing. Friends, colleagues, and even psychologists described the psychological toll of Ethan's manipulation, detailing Lena's increasingly fragile state in the days leading to the shooting. The footage, once hidden and intimate, was laid bare in court, a horrifying testament to the invasion she had endured. Each clip was a double-edged sword, proof of abuse, but also undeniable. Evidence of betrayal, exposure, and humiliation. Cross-examination was brutal. The prosecution sought to dismantle her credibility, to paint her as calculating and vindictive. They highlighted moments of hesitation, questions of temperament, and any instance that could suggest motive beyond self-defense. Lena's hands shook slightly, but she remained seated, listening, letting the defense redirect the narrative back to the manipulation and violation that had forced her hand. Outside the courtroom, the city was alive with speculation. Headlines declared her guilty or innocent before the verdict. Each article a reminder of the precariousness of truth in a world obsessed with scandal. Inside, Lena focused only on what mattered, asserting her reality against a tide of judgment, a narrative she did not control. As the final arguments concluded, the courtroom seemed suspended in tension. The jury would deliberate, weighing evidence against emotion, betrayal against legality. Lena sat back in her chair, staring at the ceiling, breathing slowly, aware that no verdict could fully restore what had been taken from her. Her privacy, her trust, her innocence. And yet, even amidst the chaos, there was a flicker of something fragile but undeniable. Lena had survived. She had faced the truth, acted within the confines of her breaking point. And now, the world would have to confront the full story, however partial or distorted. The trial would end, the verdict would come, but the emotional aftermath, the reckoning, with manipulation, control, and betrayal, would linger far longer. The courtroom was hushed, every eye fixed on the jury as they returned. Lena's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white, her breath shallow. The months of trial, the scrutiny, the whispers, the relentless replay of her life's most private moments had led to this single, fragile moment. Outside, the city waited with bated breath, headlines already forming, ready to consume the story regardless of truth. The foreperson stood, papers in hand, and spoke clearly. "We, the jury, find the defendant." Lena's heart hammered so violently she feared it might burst. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, willing the world to pause, willing the decision to reflect everything she had endured. Not guilty on the grounds of self-defense. The words landed like a shockwave. Relief, disbelief, and exhaustion collided within her. Tears pricked her eyes as she slumped slightly in her chair. the weight of fear and tension lifting just enough to let the trembling begin. Around her, murmurs filled the room, some sympathetic, some disbelieving. But she felt only the quiet victory of survival, of having faced the unimaginable and come through it alive. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the city roared with opinions. Lena walked through the crowd, shielded by her lawyer and security, her mind a storm of exhaustion and reflection. She had survived the manipulation, the betrayal, the legal battle, but the scars would remain, invisible yet permanent. Later, alone in a small apartment she had rented for solitude, Lena allowed herself to finally breathe. She stared at her reflection in the darkened window, the city lights flickering like distant stars. The woman looking back was changed, stronger, wary, aware of the fragility of trust and the dangerous allure of charm. Yet there was also something quieter, deeper, a recognition that she had reclaimed control of her life, even if it had come at an unimaginable cost.